Hello, everyone. Welcome to Opus Private Client. Adam and Rolewicz and myself, Iván Watanabe, we're excited to have you all on. Today, we wanted to share a topic that we've been doing a lot of research on and discussing internally regarding one of the major risks in retirement, that being the sequence of returns and how to mitigate that risk during retirement planning. So without further ado, Adam, I want you to kick it off and just kind of share a little bit about what the sequence of returns
Sure.
risk is and how we can go about solving that for clients.
Well, let me just start with saying that I think one of the reasons why I find this to be so important is because it is talked about so little.
Yeah.
We have a lot of clients, even in the financial services industry, and they've never even heard of sequence of returns risk, which in my view is the reason why it's all that much more important to get the conversation out there, because it really can have a tremendous impact in the type of retirement that you have, good or bad.
Yep, for sure.
So maybe let me just begin with, let's talk about what it is. So sequence of returns, an easy way to think about this is it's just the order that your returns come in. So we know markets are cyclical and we can't control what the returns are going to necessarily be. Let's just say we have an example where we go 6%, 10%, 15, -7. That could just as easily go in the complete reverse order, depending on, where we happen to enter the market and the cycle that we're in. In either one of these scenarios, though, while the returns are completely mirror image or backwards, it's still a 6% average return. So most of the industry talks about average returns, and a 6% average return would be accurate for either one of these scenarios. Where we look at this now, and let's just say, we have an example here where we've got somebody with almost $3 million in a retirement account, and it's a historical look back, roughly 70% S&P, 30% 10-year treasuries, just to get a little bit of a blended portfolio. And we're going to look at these returns on the account for the last 20 years, but we're going to mirror image them. And we're not taking any money out. This is just money that's going to sit there. We assume if this money just sat there and grew over time, what does it look like? And what we notice is that this sequence of returns, we start at 3 million and we end in the exact same spot. So the sequence of returns doesn't make a difference. We take a different path to get there, but we start and end at the same value. And we have a 6.5% return for either scenario. So when does the sequence of returns matter? Well, we said it doesn't matter during the accumulation phase. And the accumulation phase, when you're growing your money, is what most people are accustomed to. That's what most people are currently living in. Unless you're already retired, that's the phase you're in. So when you get into the distribution phase, or starting to now draw money from your assets, retirement, that's where the sequence of returns comes in. That's one of the reasons why I think it's not talked about as much, is because most people that are writing articles, most people that are out there in the workforce and kind of putting, the word on the street, aren't in the retirement phase. So a sequence of returns is most critical while you're taking your money. And at this point, it's too late. You can't make any difference. You can't make any changes. You can't work longer. You can't save more. And negative returns early in retirement can increase significantly the probability of you outliving your money. You can't time markets. We all know that. And if we sell principal, we sell our dollars while they're down, we lock in that sequence risk. So let me give you an example of what the same scenario here. We're going to start with the same value. We're looking back, the same exact returns. But in this case, we're going to take income out. We're going to take a 5% withdrawal of our income, and we're going to increase that over time. And what we see is that we start at the same place, same return pattern we had before, but now we are very far apart in the actual values. And what's important to note about this is if you look at the return sequence, we see that after negative market years, after 3 of the 4 best returns come in the year after a negative market. So we're down, and then we're up 21. We're down, we're up 19. We're down, we're up 22. Other than that, there was a 23 here in the middle of the scenario without the negative return. But 75% of the time, our biggest returns in the last 20 years have occurred after negative markets. So when we pull money out of an account, while we're in retirement, we're pulling money out, that has a major impact on the actual ending value. So now we're $3.5 million apart. That's the difference between, having a retirement where you feel like you're comfortable and can take the kids to Disney, grandkids to Disney, help pay for, grandkids' education or give to charity, versus being fearful, disappointed, afraid. You're forcing yourself to live in a much lower standard than you're used to because you're just terrified of running out of money and outliving it.
Right. And I think the tough part here, Adam, is that you don't know when those negative returns are going to happen, right? You don't know if you're going to be the blue scenario where you have early negative returns, right? Or you're, somebody that tried to retire recently, maybe the beginning of last year, or if you're going to be the person that retires this year when the markets are up, right? You have no idea when those negative returns are going to happen. And so I think that's really where, the sequence of returns protection design comes into place.
Absolutely. And, it's about going into retirement, having a plan in place to address this. Imagine, it's fresh in our minds, right? Imagine you retired at the beginning of 2020. Everything starts out great, but March rolls around and all of a sudden the market drops 30%.
Right.
If you don't have a strategy going into that, you're going to make panic decisions.
Yep.
You're going to start liquidating assets and saying, oh my God, I'm down. I got to get out of this. And what do? You move out of the market. Maybe you catch it halfway down and you're only down, 20% or 15%. And you think you're lucky, but now you're out of the market because of that panic reaction. And what happens the rest of the year, right? You just lost the huge uptick that we had after that.
Yep.
Right. You look over the last year, March 20 to March 2021, and you have accounts that are up 50%.
Yeah. I remember seeing a story about a number of retirees that panicked in March, pulled into cash. And I want to say the number was somewhere around 40% of retirees moved into cash, right? I mean, a tremendous amount of people. The other thing that's fascinating about the slide here is that the person in blue almost ran out of money and they got a 6.5% average rate of return, right? That blows your mind because everybody focuses on the growth aspect of it. But when you actually start to pull money, again, they got a 6.5% positive average return and still almost ran out of money.
Absolutely.
Right.
And you can't time. That's the biggest issue with this, right? So you hit it on the head before. You can't time it. You don't know when that market's going to occur. Nobody could have predicted what we were going to go through last year.
Right.
And you have to know ahead of time and have systems in place ahead of time that give you peace that you can react to those negative markets because they will occur.
Yeah.
Right. It's going to occur. It's just a question of how you react to it.
Right.
So what are some of the ways that we can, you can set up in your mind ahead of time to manage this risk? Well, we can just spend less money and adhere to a more conservative budget. I mean, that's kind of obvious, and it doesn't take much thought, but there's really no fun in that. We can have a flexible spending plan that can only go so far. If you are, depends how close your income is to your lifestyle expenses already. How thin that margin is. Because you may not be able to afford a 30% cut in your spending. Your expenses may not, be able to be paid if you had a 30% spending cut. We can reduce volatility impact by going into more predictable or guaranteed sources. You're probably already going to be doing this anyway. So, you're talking about shifting even more and more assets over, which can mean that you have, you kind of are going the other way now where you don't get to have the same type of market returns on the upside, which can add to a lot of longevity in the portfolio.
Right.
One of the things that we think is most interesting to have in this is something called a buffer asset. So simply a buffer asset is something that's not correlated to the market. So it could be things like cash, reverse mortgages, whole life insurance. These are kind of the three big buffer assets that come to mind that aren't impacted directly when the markets go up and down, that can be integrated into your world. So I wanted to focus in on the life insurance one. I think that one is the most attractive from a tax efficiency and some of the other ancillary benefits that come with it. And it's just a pretty unique way to approach using it as a buffer asset. So one of the most important things about the whole life insurance strategy is that it is old, right? It has weathered the storm. It's proven time and time again. We've seen all these different insurance policies come through cycles and fads, and the variables policies of the 90s, and interest or universal life policies through the 80s when interest rates were high. Whole life has always been around. It's always weathered the various economic cycles because it's built on guarantees. It is a kind of slow and steady wins the race. And it's at its core, it has guaranteed values built into it, guaranteed death benefit, guaranteed cash value. So the cash value, this is what makes it an important buffer asset. Doesn't matter what happens in the market. Doesn't matter what happens with interest rates. Your cash value cannot decrease. And once you get a dividend, so there's a non-guaranteed component called a dividend that gets given to you. After that's given to you, that becomes guaranteed as well. So they can't take it away once you get it. And these quality carriers out there that we like to work with that have these products, they have a tremendous track record through Great Depressions, through all of the economic uncertainties, through world wars. They have always paid a non-guaranteed dividend, even when they didn't have to. Yep. And it's tax efficient. So it's, you have access to the cash values in a income tax-free environment, which also allows you to do some efficient tax planning. And premiums are guaranteed level, we can structure it a whole bunch of different ways. So let me just give you an example. We had this couple that we were looking at, and they said, okay, we're each going to take out a $500,000 policy, and we're going to pay it for 20 years. And after 20 years, our cash value is going to be $560,000, and we're going to have a death benefit of 1.4 million combined. And let's now look at integrating whole life insurance into the retirement account. So same exact scenario we had before, right? Where we start with $3 million. We have the risk that we're trying to solve against, which is these early negative return years, and we're taking income out. And so this income here is net of the 40% tax. We're taking that same 5% withdrawal. We're going to take tax out of it because this is coming out of a 401k plan. And in this scenario, we don't touch the insurance. It's kind of sitting there on the sideline. And at the end of the day, we have our account balance. So we have the 401k dollars plus the cash value, or the 401k dollars plus the death benefit. I kind of call those the account and cash value, or the account and death benefit. So let's look at the example though now where we actually integrate. So what I want to do here is we have a negative year. We don't know when the year starts that it's going to be negative, right? So we're taking money out of our account anyway.
Yep.
It's the year after a negative market. Now we can look back and say, okay, the market was down last year. Let me hold off and not take money out of my retirement plan. Instead, I'm going to go tap that cash value, because the cash value we know didn't decrease no matter what happened with the market. So it's a nice, safe place to go get money. And we can do this to allow those dollars to recover now in the 401k, right? So we know that you typically will have, or we historically have had, big return years after negative markets. So it lets more money stay in your account, stay invested, and catch that rebound. It's the difference of having, taken all your dollars and put it in cash last March versus staying invested. Yep. And catching that rebound. So just same thing. I'm going to play this out now for the 20 years that we're looking at it. And we notice a pretty big difference when we go to summarize here. So in this strategy, after 20 years, let's just look at what happens. So when we didn't have the buffer asset strategy built in. We had $2.2 million that we got to spend and use in retirement and enjoy. And at the end of the day, we had 1.3 million between our 401k and cash value. And at our death, the family or the legacy would have had 1.7. When we integrate that buffer strategy by doing this and leaving your dollars invested after negative market cycles, we still have 2.2 million that we spent, right? We spent the exact same number or exact same dollars, but look how much more money and more legacy we're able to leave. The other way you could look at this is, well, maybe I want to end up, maybe I'm okay being in the first person scenario here where, I only leave 1.7 instead of 3.2. Great. You get to go spend another $1.5 million of your money while you're in retirement. So you can kind of toggle that switch. You can say, I want to spend more, and I'm comfortable doing that because I've got this death benefit that will replace what I spend while I'm alive. But the choice becomes yours. And without the insurance in place or without any type of a buffer asset in place, you're relegated. You have no other choice but to take money out of the market. So that, I think, is the biggest thing that we can, get the word out there for people, is it's about having options, and you want to position yourself over time to have multiple places where you can access money from through different tax cycles, through different market cycles. I think the most dangerous thing people can get into is just falling into the trap of, I've got my 401k set up at work and I'm, maxing that out. And so I'm going to be good for retirement. It's a single bucket approach, and it leaves you no ability to be flexible, nimble, maneuver as the world around you changes, which we know it will.
Right. Because it's interesting. The entire industry is focused on the accumulation strategy, which we obviously have conversations with our clients, and that's important to us. But there's no conversation about getting down the mountain, right? The getting down the mountain is extremely important. And this is a 20-year scenario, right? If you go out a couple more years, the person that had negative returns runs out of money eventually.
Gone.
Right. Yeah. So at 85 years old, 87 years old, you've now run out of money. And I think the options of what you're talking about is just critical for any type of retirement plan, because like you said, you just don't know what's ahead. You have no idea what lies ahead. So having access to more capital during retirement with more flexibility is just super important.
Absolutely.
Important.
So that's what I wanted to share today. And then hopefully it's able to, give you out there something to think about. Happy to have additional conversations on it. And, obviously it's unique to everybody's situation, and, there's no one way to skin a cat, but this is absolutely a very critical discussion that I think needs to be had anytime somebody's talking about retirement planning.
Yep. Adam, as always, I know the audience is going to really appreciate the information. Thank you for sharing it. And to the audience, we appreciate the time.
Great. Look forward to helping out anybody we can.